All right, you guys, welcome to the Big Money Stylist podcast. I'm Danielle K, your host, and I started this podcast actually probably 5 years ago, and I was like, hairstylists don't podcast. I'm not going to do that. And I've actually really enjoyed doing it. I love hearing people's stories, and I love using this as a tool and an opportunity to inspire others and add value if we can. So today we have a special guest. We're here in my home. We're not in the podcast studio today. And somebody who I've wanted to have on this podcast for a while, and I just kept asking and asking and asking, and then finally said, like, can I please do your hair? And also, can you do a podcast with me? So we have Lori Harder on the podcast today. Thanks for coming and being
I'm so excited to be here.
I love it.
I mean, you can't beat this view right now either.
I specifically set it up so we have a nice ocean view going on.
I'm like, can this be like 3 hours till
I know.
sunset?
I'm like, should we have a cocktail?
Yeah.
Like, well, so tell me, you have your podcast as well. Are you still actively doing that?
Oh yeah, three times a week.
You do? Okay. Where's your studio at?
So if it's an interview, we tend to like travel around. Like we'll book an LA in Airbnb and we'll do like 10 interviews for like 2 days or something.
Okay.
But there's also studios that I use in different areas.
So remind us the name of your podcast.
It's Earn Your Happy.
Earn Your Happy. That's right. I've seen it quite a bit, and I feel like you know everybody, and you have everybody on your podcast, and just kind of like networking seems to be your thing. How long have you had your podcast?
Oh my gosh, it's been 8 years now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of kind of the more, I wouldn't say the first, but for women like really going at it in the podcast world, there wasn't a ton of people doing it.
Okay.
And I would say now everyone has a podcast, but I still think it's fairly easy to get out there in a big way, because you just have to be consistent. Most people don't make it past, I think it was like episode 13 or something.
Yeah. I like podcasts. I actually listen to podcasts quite a bit, and I feel like you can get to know somebody really well.
Yes.
And if you can get some value out of it, great. I think it's a great way to connect, especially on social media now, where it's like so many pretty pictures. And I'm like, okay, well, who's Lori and what is she about?
Yes.
So I love that you're still going and doing it, and people probably find a ton of value out of it.
Yeah, I love long form, because I love learning about you guys too. Like, especially when you do like the show, or like you do like extended things together, you and your husband. I'm like, I love long form.
Yeah.
So for some people, if it's hard to do short form and you're like, God, there's just not enough context, podcasting might be a really great option.
I feel like too, like podcasting for me is like helping me with my communication skills too.
1,000,000%.
It's just like putting yourself on camera, because I'm sure like you train women as well.
Yep.
And you're like, you just have to be willing to put yourself out there. Yep. And they're like so nervous, and they're like, I feel so dumb. And you're like, it doesn't matter. We all feel that way in the beginning, and you just kind of have to go and put yourself out there and do that.
I literally talk about this all the time, because it's the difference between people thinking, oh, you should just be comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And saying, okay, well, podcasting, the way to look at it is not, oh, I have to podcast and be perfect when I put it out there.
Right.
I view it literally as my reps. So I know that you have, you love working out. You've competed in fitness competitions. It's like a really big thing for you. And I think having that as a foundation has served me so well in everything that I've done.
Right.
Because it's the reminder that you have to put reps in. Like, you have to have 300 episodes of your podcast before you can even consider yourself like decent, know, because you have to, it's awkward turning on a microphone and talking to nobody, in some episodes.
Right. So, okay. So one of the things, when you came into my salon and we were doing hair and that kind of thing, I was like, okay, so what is Gloci? And I know you had your pink drink, and then you kind of transitioned, and I want to hear more of that story, because this product seems to resonate with you and who you are. And you're also like, you seem very fit, very health conscious and things like that. So tell us about your new product and what inspired you to start that.
So Gloci is a skin routine you can drink. It's powdered packets. You get 30 in each box, and you put it in water, and it is a daily beauty supplement. Okay. So the reason that I love it is because I have been in the health world for a very long time. I probably started in I think 2008 maybe 2007 I kind of started competing. maybe 2006. I'm terrible with it.
Somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there. And I have taken so many supplements. I've taken so many pills, so many powders, so many different things. And the thing that I stuck to throughout all the years were like shakes and powdered packets for my drink. It's easy. Yeah. It's an easy transportation system.
Right.
But I always want to be taking things that are good for me.
Right.
And so I'll tell you about the pivot in a second, but I was trying to think of what to pivot into for multiple reasons, which I'll get into. And I just had this moment looking at these hydration packets that I use. And I was like,
you're like, why don't I have this?
Why I'm drinking expensive salt and sugar. Why doesn't this do more for me? Like, I just wish it did more. And also so many crazy fake sweeteners that I was putting into my body that I'm like, I know this cannot be good for me. I know I should be doing something else. And so that was when I started going, what would I want this to do? And I actually asked a couple of my girlfriends who have really, really large communities. We surveyed we got over 5,000 answers back of, if you could have your hydration packets do more, what would you want them to do? How would you want to feel? And it all came back. I want to feel lighter in my body. They felt like they weren't really digesting their food. They felt bloated. They wanted their skin to glow. They knew they should be drinking more water, but they wanted incentivization with like a good flavor that was more natural. So we just took all of that feedback, and also we were solving our own problem. And I think that that's where the best businesses come from. It's also why you did this for yourself with your hair and your hair extensions. And that way it's like
authentic.
When you do that, it's so authentic. It's never hard to talk about.
Right. Because you're passionate about it.
Yeah.
I tried them and I was like, I need to order more because I'm awful. I feel embarrassed even telling you this, but like literally I drink a lot of water. You know me. I always have my water, and I'm like, people are like, what's in your water? Because it's like pea yellow. And I'm like, it's Crystal Light. And I'm like, oh my God. But I'm like, what you're saying resonates to me, because I'm like, I want to get my water in and I want it to taste good. But there's so many times where I'm like taking vitamins and supplements and things, and I'm like, is it doing anything, and why am I taking it? But I love that you're like, it regulates like digestive, skin glowing, and like, is it collagen? Does it have a collagen booster in there? Is that with the skin?
It doesn't have collagen. I'll tell you all the things in it. So we have a probiotic that has 30 clinical studies on it. So you can actually know it's doing something in your body, which is really cool.
Nice.
And so if I'm going to take something, especially a probiotic, I want to know that it's survived not only the trip to my gut, but to my house, like manufacturing and all the different things. And then we have hyaluronic acid, we have prickly pear, we have coconut water powder, we have zinc, we have vitamin C and magnesium. So vitamin C, I believe there's so many.
Vitamin C is great for the skin.
So good, because your body can't make its own collagen without vitamin C. You actually have to supplement it because your body doesn't make vitamin C. A lot of people don't even know what collagen is, though. They've just been told, like, oh, do collagen. So it's like, I love that you were like, well, what do you want? I want glowing skin. Well, what does that look like? Yes. Yeah. And we went to a ton of different doctors, dermatologists. I have a lot of friends who have aesthetic spas. And so it was just like, what are those main ingredients that if we were just going to do like 8, because in the supplement world, there's something called a fairy dusting of like just putting a little bit of something in there just to say you have it in there for marketing. Like, and so I didn't want 70 ingredients. I wanted like 8 so I could go to the maximum of what that ingredient was, so we could feel and see results. Because in the fitness world, like I would try so many different things, and if I didn't feel it or see a result, I was done with it in a week.
How many of those can you drink a day?
I drink 2. I wouldn't go, if you have, the only reason you can't drink more than like 3 is because of the zinc, if you have a sensitive stomach. So some people just get like sensitive to zinc.
I'm going to get hooked on them. I know it. Because like once I try something, I'm like so religious. Like I have these vitamins that people always ask me about. I'm like, I've been taking these for 6 years straight. Yeah. And I'm like you, if I believe in it, I'm like, I'm going to promote what I believe in. So I need to get more of those. I did try them for like a few days, but I need to reorder.
Well, that's yours. Okay, but good. Really, I'm like, oh my gosh, please take a before and after for me.
So what have you noticed when in your body in drinking them? You just kind of feel all the things, like feel a little bit better?
I feel like I wake up lean a lot.
I like that. I like that already. The morning stomach, you're like, okay, I love it.
I feel like I'm digesting my food. I feel like where my skin, so I have really dry skin, like really dry. And I feel like when I drink this, I've been drinking it for so long now. Like I don't need that moisturizer all the time. You know, that feeling of like, it just hurts like skin. I feel like my fine lines are a little bit more smoothed out, like a little more plumped because of the hyaluronic acid. I actually just feel really good a lot.
Okay, you sold me. So, but it's all the little things, right? And if you can take all the little things and make it simplified into, Gloci, then why not? So tell me, like, how did you transition? Like, I know you were doing the canned wine, and like, as an entrepreneur myself, like, I know, like, when you're not like, hey, this isn't going the direction I want to go, sometimes it's scary, but you have to trust your gut and pivot. Yeah. So tell me, like, I'm sure that, like, there's a story to that. Like,
it's a big story.
Well, you can tell me as much as you want to tell me, but I'm glad I can see you're so passionate about Gloci. So how was it making the transition for you, and how did that go down?
What I want to say is if someone's in something right now and they feel like it's a failure or it's a lost cause or like it was a waste of time. The way that you and your husband operate, I know that you'll feel this way too. It's so clear to me knowing that I could have never gotten to this product that I'm so passionate about if I didn't first start with the initial idea. And even though there was they call it sunk time cost, where people can get so stuck in the time you invested that you can't pivot, that you actually do fail, where really it was about that time spent was learning. So in 2020, let's back up actually, because this does have to do with my book. So 2017, I had wrote a book. I loved it. I was doing women's events, like 500 women, 3-day weekends. We were doing other entrepreneurial events as well.
Remind us the name of your book again.
A Tribe Called Bliss.
A Tribe Called Bliss, that's right.
So we were primarily like an events company, and Chris and I had also done network marketing, and we flew up through the ranks, and we were top in our network marketing for like 10 years. And so we had a lot of different irons in the fire. And in 2017, that was my main goal in life, was writing a book, and I never thought I would, because I don't know if you know this, but I never graduated high school.
Oh, really?
So I was like still to this day. I was homeschooled through high school. I was raised in a more restrictive religion, and I'm from a super small town.
My daughter she's not graduating high school, and I don't care. I'm like, I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, it used to be a thing. It used to be like a big thing.
Yeah.
So this was back in the day when it was a big thing. Now I'm like, I would feel the exact same way actually. So when I wrote my book, I had this realization of like, I never really dreamt past this moment. Like, this is something I never actually thought I would do. So in 2017, wrote the book, toured it, like to 12 different cities. Loved it, but I was noticing that I wasn't feeling like challenged in my life, and I also felt capped. Like, I felt like
you hit your ceiling.
I didn't know what else my skill set could transition into besides what I was doing, and I didn't want to keep launching things, and I didn't want to keep doing what I was doing. And simultaneously, I was getting really interested in like listening to founder podcasts. Like women who had built companies and sold companies. And we had lived in LA for not too long. Well, actually, maybe it was about 5 or 6 years at this point. And my husband had started investing in companies, and I started getting interested in that conversation and learning about it. But I was like, it's hard for me to learn. Like, I'm not good with numbers. Like, this feels like a conversation that's too big for me. So he just kept going to these dinners and coming home and go, oh my God, I met this guy who sold his company for $300 million, for $600 million, for $100 million. And I was like,
how do you do this?
Well, I sure would like to make that kind of money someday. And he's like, come to the next dinner. So I went, and I'm sitting there with these guys and just listening to them talk, and they were having like just honestly beautiful conversations of like, how can they help each other? Who's invested in what company? What's going on? And when I went, I allowed myself to just ask questions, like stupid questions. And if they were explaining it in language that I didn't understand, I would say, okay, explain it in a way like total layman's terms, like in a way that I can understand. And they were so kind, so amazing, and just took the time. Like, the whole conversation kind of shifted, and they became interested that I was interested. And I told them, I was like, my girlfriends are not having this conversation, and they're all feeling really capped at the like the 6 and 7 figure mark. And I had this moment of like, if I want this to change, because that you know that feeling where like, this feels like my next direction and thing, and maybe the whole point of everything. And I was getting this really visceral, like emotional feeling in my body, like, oh my God, I think it has to be me who brings this back to my girlfriends. And so I started asking myself the question. I gave myself a year that I was like still doing all of the things that I was doing in the different companies. But I gave myself a year before I started a new project. That was like, I asked myself these 3 questions. If I had all of the time, all of the money, and all of the network in the world, what would I be doing? I asked those 3 questions specifically because I was capping myself if I didn't ask those. So all of the time, I didn't have it at the moment, but I knew I could create it. I knew that I could like get really strategic in what I was doing and try to figure that out. All of the network, I didn't have the network that would help me build a product, and I didn't have the network that could help me raise money yet, but I knew that I could find it because at this point I wasn't an author before that, but I infiltrated into the author world and into their events and like all of those things. And I wrote a book. Like that's how I did it.
I think people think that you're just going to figure it out. And the only way you're going to figure it out is if you go. What I love in everything that you're saying right now is you had this moment where you felt called to help other women figure it out.
Totally.
And the calling, and when you feel that, it'll keep you feeling discouraged, dumb, depressed, like whatever, because you're like, no, I know I'm supposed to help these women go here. So you're willing to feel uncomfortable over and over again. And I love what you said in the beginning of the podcast where you're like, I look at it as not a loss, but a learning experience, because that is way bigger than a loss.
Yes.
So I'm like over here getting a little bit of goosebumps, and I'm like, I love hearing the story, but keep going, keep telling me.
So the last one was if I had all the money in the world, and I didn't have that at the time because I was like, I know that a lot of these companies can require just like a ton of money. And there's also an idea out there that you should never use your own money to build something. So these were all of these different things like whirling in my head. And that's when it was like, I just asked that question over and over. What would I be doing? What sounds fun? What is it? And at the time, I had written the book about female friendships and going deeper than superficial, like friendships and conversations, because this has been a theme in my life where I have had, I got a lot of people in my life at one point, but I didn't feel like we were like deeply connected. And so when I wrote the book, I wanted it to be more, for like mainstream women who didn't have access to learning how to have these conversations or work through really awkward moments with your girlfriends, or like all of these moments where you're like, God, why are women like this? Or like all of these challenges. And what happened was the book did well, but it did well more in the community that was like already in the personal development community. I wanted to hit mainstream women. So I was like, where are they at? Where are they at? What are they doing? And I'm like, oh, they're drinking wine together. They are all, because I was in LA and I was going to these networking events, and nobody looked happy. They all looked lonely. And it was like, wine. I was like, is anyone else having the worst time ever? Because I am. So that's when I was like, what if we did like a lighter wine spritz? Because spritzes were just starting to come out, but there were no wine base, and they were not geared towards women. They were ugly cans. They were just like kind of trashy looking. And I was like, okay, let's do something a little more elevated. And what if I put 3 questions on the back of the can that I know work from my events that maybe if they read them, they could like get an idea, a contact, a deeper relationship out of it. So, and then there was also the non-alc rosé that we were doing, because I'm like, I have half my girlfriends don't drink, but they hate looking like they don't drink and getting asked the question.
So they want to have,
So we're like, what if it all just looked like one thing? And so this felt like a great idea. Beginning of 2020, I'm like, I'm going to go for it. We're just going to try this, because it was on the curve of like these spritz just starting to come out. And I love a cocktail. Like I love it. But I'm also really into fitness and health. So this was like a great idea for me. And everybody loved it. And I pitched it to a ton of women and got 54 female investors, and we raised $2 million. Wow. And they were really excited about it. And so, as you know, 2020, what happened in that? And it was such a tough time for everyone, let alone, well, for most people, not everyone. Actually, some people did really well, but for startups, essentially.
I was gonna say for startups.
Because co-packing, manufacturing, things were closing down. Something called MOQs, which is minimum order quantities for products. Everything shot up, shipping shot up. So what would have been an easier entry point to get in a startup world of a product turned into like the most challenging thing ever. So I ended up spending $1 million trying to get it done, and we were so close. And we ended up hitting like 2 massive walls we couldn't get through. So one of them was that the final straw was that the licensing for alcohol online wanted all the fingerprints of all the women. And some of the women were like, it's not happening.
Yeah.
And if you don't have everyone on board, you're done. And so the most interesting thing about this is the day that so before this, knowing that it wasn't working, I was starting to like my normal, like healthy self who has the tools to, you know, work through stuff. I've done a lot of personal development. I like to consider like, okay, I can handle this.
Yeah.
It was so bad. It was the worst it's ever been. It was the darkest moment of my life because my biggest fear is disappointing people that I look up to.
Right.
And what did I do?
Right.
I got all the women I look up to. And I got their money, which was also still, I guess I had some wounding around money from growing up. You think you work through these things and it just comes back. And so I would just lay awake at night. It was like 2 or 3 a.m. I had started drinking wine like every single night because I was so stressed out all the time. And so that flared up my anxiety so much. And then you're just in this cycle of like anxiety, stress, depression.
Right.
And I remember one point at night, like, there was just like a couple hours and I had woke my husband up and I was like, I am having horrible intrusive thoughts. Like if something happened to me, it would just be better because I can't disappoint these women. And I like looking back, I'm like, it shouldn't have gotten to that point, but I was holding it all in.
Yes.
And what happened was the women that I normally talk to about it, I had them as investors. So I felt too ashamed to talk to them.
I think that's common for women though, is like we want to be like superheroes. And so we like shove all of our feelings down until it's like, you're like, I can't keep doing this anymore.
Yes.
Like you're like, I physically, emotionally, mentally, like you're like, I've got to let it go. And I think the problem is a lot of times it's like, you think you're holding on to it as the strong thing, but sometimes letting go is actually like the stronger thing. So how did you kind of like really listen to your intuition and be like, I mean, obviously you're in a dark, painful spot, but you had to kind of unleash it instead of try to like save it.
Yeah.
You're like, how did you do that? Like, how did you transition?
Oh, you know, I think I got so uncomfortable in like those moments of this is awful that I was like, I have to tell people what's going on. And it's always been my saving grace. And so anybody listening, I want to remind you, like sharing it with people is going to be the way through. Right. And yes, you have to be cautious of who you share it with, but truly sharing it with people is going to save you. So there was a point where I was like, I can't hold this in. I have to find somebody who could look at my business and just tell me like, is this a viable business anymore? Right. Like, so I ended up, connecting with this woman who was an alcohol expert. Truly. She's one of my favorite humans to date now. And I had asked her, I'm like, hey, I just need to be really vulnerable with you. Like, can you just look at this and let me tell you the internal of everything and you just tell me what I have? And she's like, no, you don't have a viable business anymore. Like, you should pivot. She was like, your skill set is like over here. You should just go back over here. And I was like, what do you mean I should just like go back over here? She's like, people pivot all the time.
It probably felt very freeing.
It was so freeing and almost like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Why didn't I talk to you 3 months ago or 4 months ago, you know? And so that was the moment of, okay, if I did pivot, what does that look like? And when I opened that up, like that other idea or actually this was like right before that, I have to share this because when you start saying, okay, I just surrendered. There was a point where I was like, God, take the wheel. I can't, like, I literally cannot do this and I cannot see the way through. Right. And so it was like a few nights later, all of a sudden I hear this, like, so I'm very like audible. So I'll either hear voices or whatever, if I'm looking for it. And is it my own voice? Is it God? I don't know. I'm open. I'm very open to it because it helps no matter what. So I was just like, take the wheel, help me, show me something. Like, just what's the next step? You don't have to show me what's next, just show me the next step. Right. And what gave me clarity was like this, in the middle of the night, I heard, sounds goofy, but I'll explain it. I heard, turn the Titanic. Like, it's your job. And so what that meant was, in that moment, I understood that like the Titanic was, everybody just boarded the ship, like literally in real life, everyone boarded the Titanic, not about the destination. It was about like what was going on the ship. They were excited about that. And if I'm the captain and I see the iceberg and think like, yeah, but they're attached to where we're going because I told them it was this alcohol product or whatever it was. And I'm like, oh, but there's the iceberg, but we have to keep going. It was like, that's not why they're here. So the message for me came as, they're here for like the mission of what they were pitched. They're here for Yeah, that's great.
Sorry.
They're here for like the idea. They're here for what they know this is going to be able to do.
Right.
And I just knew that as the, you know, like as quote unquote the captain of the ship, like it was my job to get them excited about a new destination.
I love that you're sharing this. I had a similar situation like a year and a half ago where I had to let one of my lead trainers go. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do it. I was stressing, all this stuff.
Yes.
And I realized that like something where it's like, they're here for you. Like they love the hair, but like they're here for you, like your tribe and your community.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've seen you do very well is network and create this tribe. And I genuinely feel it's for you to like be their leader, their captain, right? And so I love that you just shared, like you just had to turn the ship. And you might have some people that are like, you can't turn the ship on me.
Yes, and I absolutely did. I absolutely did. There were only like 3.
Okay.
And that was, but they were loud and it was hard.
Yeah.
But looking back, those conversations turned me into a leader that I had always dreamt of being.
Oh, good.
Only those, though.
Yeah.
You can't become the leader that you want to be through the easy stuff.
Right.
It's always the stuff that is
It's
like,
a challenge.
I don't want to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Like maybe I cry before I literally get on the phone, or maybe I cry during the conversation, even though that's your worst nightmare. Like, but you get through.
Yeah.
And those emotions are just like, I view them as tidal waves because yes, it is like, here's the conversation coming at you. It's huge. It feels awful. You feel like you'll never make it. But a tidal wave only takes, you know,
so long.
It's only like a few minutes.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that feeling really dissipates throughout your body.
Right.
And what happens after that feeling goes through your body of a hard conversation or a hard moment is you literally start to get your power back right away.
Yeah, you feel more powerful.
You just feel free.
Yeah,
and
free.
then you can't put that jack back in the box.
Yeah, and then you're like, okay, that wasn't as like sweaty or as hard as I thought.
Yeah.
In fact, I feel like the stress you hold on not having those conversations is harder than just having the conversation.
Way worse. It'll eat you alive.
Yes.
It robs all the joy from any joyful moments in your life. So now I'm so fiercely like, if I've got anything, I'm like, shoot, I have to have that conversation. I'm like,
you're like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah. And I'm not going to have it next week because I'm not even going to live that way anymore. I'm like, can I have it in 30 minutes?
You're like, I got to
free?
get this done. Yeah, well, I feel like it too, it's like you learn to tolerate less in yourself. And when you're like, it's just a conversation and it's going to suck, or I can think about it for the next 2 weeks.
Which
and
sucks worse.
You're like, I'm just going to call them right now and get it done with.
You just need one reference point. Like you need to have one tough conversation that you're like, oh, that was awful, but it was quick and it went well.
Yeah.
So, well.
And then it's like your capacity goes up and you just, what was hard is like, it's still hard, but you're not like so stressed about it. You can have those conversations that are hard and you're like, I've got this under control. And that's when you can like move through your business even quicker, you know, because you're making very less emotional decisions and like, hey, this is hard and I'm not insensitive, but we're going to pivot and this is the direction we're going to go.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of women have a hard time with that, right? But when you look at these big CEOs and women that have, you know, done to the 8 to 9 figure businesses, it's like they've had those tough conversations so many times, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's where we need to like bridge the gap where like you said, you're trying to get these women to break to the next level. You've got to just put yourself in the trenches. You've got to have you got to let the tsunami take you over and stand back up. So I love that story. And I think it's very inspiring to not only women, but entrepreneurs, right? And I think that there's no clear path to doing anything and that you just have to be willing to put yourself in situations and like figure it out as you go.
Yep.
So I love hearing that. So you're doing the Gloci. That's like your main focus. That's your big product. Did everybody that was kind of on the pink train go to the Gloci train?
Totally.
Okay.
And I would say, 98% of them are like my investors, so excited, so much more aligned. Like they love taking it. And it's like, I think so much changed for people in 2020. I think even the culture of like not really wanting to promote alcohol is like.
Can I tell you a secret?
Yeah.
Because you had reached out to me and you were really excited about it. And I was like, I love Lori, but I don't drink wine.
Totally.
Every once in a while I do. And I was like, if it was a different product, maybe, but I couldn't promote or stand behind something that I was like, well, I don't drink wine.
Yeah, and I totally got that.
I loved the can and everything about it, but I was like, I felt like it didn't align. So something like this, for me, I feel like I can see that it aligns with you.
Oh God, it just feels so good.
I wish you the best with this product. I'm already excited to try it. I'm also in fitness, I want to actually kind of want to pick your brain a little bit about fitness.
Let's do it.
I know we're like running out of time, but I still want to know, I didn't realize you were on like 11 fitness magazines. Like, were you just like obsessed? Like, how did this all happen?
Well, I was an overweight kid from an overweight family.
Oh, wow.
And when I was pretty young, like 8 years, because I had an older sister. She was 4 years older than me, and she was overweight and got bullied in school. And so she started exercising, like Cindy Crawford workout videos way back in the day. And so I started doing those with her. And so I was I just became obsessed with like health and fitness because I felt like, at the time, I think you're doing anything to just not get picked on or bullied. And I thought, if you look that way, you must be super confident and you must, like, no one messes with you.
Right.
And so that just became like an obsession at a really young age. But living in my household, the nutrition was terrible.
Yeah.
Like it was the 80s. It's in the Midwest, a small town. And I carried these fitness magazines around with me everywhere. I would beg my mom to get them whenever we'd go to the grocery store. And at the time, there wasn't even like women's magazines in the very beginning. Yeah. But there was women's sections and men's magazines. But the second that women's fitness came out, I would carry these, Oxygen magazines and these different magazines around, and they'd be dog-eared. And it was just like, I would read them and go, okay, I know that they're doing different things than I'm doing, and it could be possible for me, because I grew up hearing it was our genetics. It was like, no, I was sitting around a table with my aunts at one point.
Like, don't expect a lot. Like, this is,
and they said, you know what, you can try that stuff, but you're going to be fat just like us, because it's how we are. And I rejected that in that moment. I remember that moment so clearly, and I was like, nope.
Yeah. I love that.
And I don't, it's like my life didn't reflect that right away, but in that moment I made a decision of I'm going to figure it out somehow.
Yeah.
It only took like 15 years later, but
still, like, I think that's so hard when you have those stories of like how you were raised and you're like, I refuse to operate in that box.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're still super fit. You had like your obsessed phase, and now I feel like you're like just in like health and wellness and that kind of thing. But I didn't realize that, like, I was talking to Rachel, she's like, yeah, she's on like 7 covers. I was like, I didn't know that. And you were doing like, it's not a bikini competition, but it was like we talked about it a little bit.
Back in the day, it kind of was the bikini competition. So it was one of there were like 2 to 3 main ones. It was NPC, oh my gosh, NPC, one other one. Was it IFBB, and then Fitness America.
Oh, okay.
And Fitness America was the one that had the fitness routines, and that's what I was working up to. That's why I chose that federation.
Yeah.
And I also liked how it looked. It was just a little bit softer and more
not
glamorous.
so muscular. Yeah.
And then, so when I was doing it, like WBFF wasn't a thing. Like, I'd won all my titles in Fitness America. So you're
like, what's next? I hit the ceiling. Yeah. What's next?
And that was kind of like, that was a huge. That's a whole other podcast.
It really, it's funny. We were talking to me before we even started the podcast, and it was like, you were like, yeah, one time I was making, what were you making? Cinnamon pancakes?
Oh my gosh. I mean, this was, so if you want to just talk about like going from, I never learned how to just be healthy.
Yeah. Well, you went from extreme.
I went from overeating everything.
Yeah. To the extreme
to
sport.
Fitness competition.
Yeah. And I get it.
I struggled so hard with the in-between.
Yeah.
And to give you an idea, like, I was making, because you're obviously trying to lean out for shows and stuff, and all you want is some freaking carbs.
Yeah.
And so I would get cinnamon, because I'm like, okay, well, cinnamon, what does it have in it? Like, nothing. And I would take literally like a quarter of a container of cinnamon and do egg whites, and somehow it made a weird pancake that... And so I would make literally egg white and cinnamon pancakes. And Chris was like, what are you doing? I'm like, it's delicious. Was it delicious? Absolutely not.
Here's what people don't realize, though, even about like these kind of sports. You're not eating like that all the time. It's like, because people will be like, you're starving yourself. You're like, you kind of are, but just for like the last 10 days.
Right, exactly. This was the last 10 days talk I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, I've loved having you on the show and getting to know you more and your story. I have always kind of felt like I connected to you, even though I didn't know you. I feel like I'm one of those people that pick up on people's energy.
Yes.
Because
same.
I'm not very social. And I like to get to know people for who they are in person. So I just really appreciate you being on this podcast. I want to ask you one more question.
Okay.
So for all of, hairstylists are entrepreneurs as well. But for women entrepreneurs that just can't step outside the box and go, what's like one little tip of advice that you could get them just to go? Like, you just shared a crazy story where, like, you were like, hey, I felt dumb in a room with all these like super entrepreneurs, and I was willing to ask these questions and feel like almost like kind of feel dumb and be like, hey, like I want to get to where you're at. So what's like one word of advice you could give to women listening to this just to kind of get them to go?
You just need proof, meaning you just need one experience in your life outside of the box. So whether you see a personal development event or a hair event that you have or something that feels uncomfortable that maybe is going to have opportunities, bigger opportunities in the room, maybe even bigger than you feel that you are worthy of at this moment. You need to go and put yourself in a situation that's uncomfortable and prove that you can even just go. Prove that you can even just get on the plane and follow through.
Right.
And what a lot of people don't have is the reps, the practice, and the proof. And the big things start so small.
Right.
And I don't think we're allowing ourselves to start really small. So it's like if you're nervous and you want to put something on, like maybe you want to be public speaking, or maybe you want to just like kind of be out there and teaching, you know, whatever your trade is. It's like get 4 women together for free at a dinner and facilitate something. Just say,
get reps in.
Yes, get the reps in. So I think that's the most important thing is collecting proof, because once you have one single moment of proof, you could say, I did that.
I did it.
Let's do it again. But you got to have a date, and then you can't let too much time lapse until your next one.
Right.
I would say get another one the next month and try to keep it monthly in the beginning, or you get rusty again.
Right. I think it's just like keeping the momentum going. Right?
Yes, for sure.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, you guys.
Thank you for having me.
Lori Harder here in my home in Orange County. So make sure to check out our podcast. It's every week. It's called the Big Money Stylist Podcast. Myself, I actually have a huge announcement for my next podcast. It's with Katie, my director of education. I am also making one of my biggest pivots in my business, and we're going to be sharing more about that on the next podcast. So you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you again, Lori. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time on the Big Money Stylist Podcast.